Welcome to the Marriage Puzzle Podcast. I'm Thomas.
I'm Julie.
And today we're going to be having another financial discussion. We talked about it some last week, but we got some questions that were sent in. We wanted to kind of go through some of those and give our thoughts around what some of you were interested in hearing about.
Yeah, I think as you opened up on our life stage now of one parent is home and one parent's working, and it's not the typical stay-at-home wife and mother. So just talking about stay-at-home parents in general. So the first question is, if one spouse stays home, how do you measure their contribution compared to the spouse who earns the income?
Yeah, that's definitely like a heavy one to start off with, because that can be a tension point in a lot of marriages. And I think that kind of the best way to describe this is that there is no clear salary value for the stay-at-home parent. But that doesn't mean that there's no value at all. And I think that's probably obvious, but I think it needs to be said that there's not no value, but maybe there's not a monetary value that you can easily put on the situation.
Sometimes you can, like if you think of the childcare you're saving. So there might be $1, on that. Like we don't have the kids in daycare or, paid education or this or that. Or are you not paying a house cleaner because someone's able to stay home? But there's so much more.
Yeah, there's
that's
a lot
what
of,
you're saying.
Right.
You can't put a salary worth if they were an employee at an organization, but there's so much non-monetary
intangible
value on that person, and that's what we want to highlight, because I am tired of hearing couples when someone's like, I'm just a stay-at-home parent, I'm just whatever. It's like, wait, are you you're cooking, you're cleaning, and if you're schooling the kids at home, you're a full-time teacher.
Right.
You're driving, or you're probably a full-time like chauffeur, taxi driver, or just organizing their schedules. And so I think that's where, I don't know if we answered the question, because it's like yes and no on the value.
So it's definitely a tricky situation, because there are some things that you can put a value to. In our situation with the kids staying home more for homeschooling, that is saving on childcare. So we could, get the rates of what it would cost to put them in school. We've historically done private schools when we put our kids in. So, if you were going to do public school, that would obviously modify how you would gauge something like this. But again, don't get so hung up on it as like this person needs to provide a monetary value in this way. You can look at it from a perspective of, wow, this is amazing how much we're saving by having this person home. And that's hard for me to say, because, when we talk about like shopping, you're the one who wants to come home and say, look how much I saved, and I'm the one who wants to know, just tell me how much you spent. I don't care how much you saved. That's a fake number. And that's essentially a similar thing to what we're talking about. Like, you can put a number on it. It's not going to be a true number, because you're talking about savings. And to give a little more detail, if you didn't hear last week's episode, go back and listen to that. But in a nutshell, we had realized that, my salary in the workforce was essentially going straight towards the kids' childcare and school costs. So we decided, well, why not have me stay at home instead of just me trading my time to an employer and then hardly getting to see my kids? Why don't I just stay home? That negates the costs that we're putting out for childcare and for school, and then I can be the one to do school. Then at least one of us gets to be around them a lot more, and they're really more in tune with their family than whatever some school is teaching them. Even if it's the best school ever, it's not you teaching them.
And you're saying we're saving money, because I think that's where this was a hot question of, like, how does that work? Because you think of the money instead of both spouses working, both contributing financially.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're also saving is a lot of stress
Mm-hmm.
and that mental load. When we talked in a previous episode of that invisible load, we have both just been happier in this scenario of more focused on family time and trust that the the other stuff we could cut down, we could cut back on. And that's where it's like, where do you put your value and your worth on this? We just always go toward money instead of relationships.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how much stress was going to be a factor with that change of lifestyle as well. So I'd say we're saving a lot of stress, frustrations, emotions, mental thoughts. So, was present with the family, but thinking of all the things that now, like, we're sharing more of that load.
And those are some of the intangible values that can't be measured monetarily, similar to just kids needing to go to doctor's appointments and things like that. That is an intangible. Like, you
want
to, that
That's true.
then you're stressed because you had to leave work and take your kids to a doctor's appointment, and so it's there's a lot of intangibles that can't be measured, and we'll talk a little bit later about why it could be healthy to try to measure some of it. So stay tuned to the end, and we'll give you some more insight there.
Before we move on, though, to that practical advice, let's flip the question, because I think that's the emphasis of people want to know, like, how do you guys do that one income, or how does one parent stay home and you're thinking about that person that is taking over all the laundry and the cooking and chauffeuring, but let's think about the person that is going to work.
Yeah.
And you talk about the financial, now they have pressure and stress that one person's like saving on, and one person has taken all of that.
Yeah, so there's definitely the pressure of, going to work and essentially feeling like you have to be perfect at work so you don't lose your job for any reason, not like feeling like there's no room for error, because if you lose your job, then that's your family's entire source of income, because you still need some kind of income. And so, you have that burden of providing, that you have to make that money. You can't, and you're the only one doing it. And so that's definitely a tough situation on the other side.
Yeah. So I think in a marriage, in a relationship, we have to think of each other's scenarios in that, whatever side role, even if you both are, I don't think both are staying home, so even if they're both, working, just thinking of the other, putting yourself in their shoes. What are they dealing with? So if there's a stay-at-home parent and a working parent, the working parent's going to always be thinking about what's the family doing without me?
Yeah.
And that could be fun, or that could be, what are they spending money on?
Right. Yeah.
Like, oh, great, you had a fun day. How much did that cost? And there's resentment. Or the other way, the stay-at-home parent might be stuck at home with the kids, doesn't feel like they have any alone time, and they see the person going, you get to go to work, you get to have adult conversations, you get to go get out of the house, or even go to lunch at a fancy restaurant, like all the things. And so it doesn't matter the gender, the husband or the wife,
right,
working, stay at home. There's just these, we can kind of just have jealousy or resentment or unfairness and tension in our marriage that we're trying to combat.
Yeah, the one thing that you said in there that stands out to me the most is, if the parent who's working is at work feeling like the spouse that's at home is just spending, you're working so they can spend to take the kids wherever or do whatever, or you just keep seeing Amazon packages show up at the door, and it's like, what do you do all day? So there's that illusion of essentially like having to fill up someone else's hole that they're digging. And so, you're working to fill up my hole that I keep digging out. That's, I think, an illusion that we can paint for ourselves as the one who is working in this scenario where one spouse is working and one is a stay-at-home. That's an illusion that you can paint for yourself that is unhealthy. And all of that just goes back to our last episode where we talked about it's our money and you have to have a planned budget and you have to do that together. Not the my car broke down, so let me loan you money type of scenario. You have to say, our car broke down. How are we going to offset something in the budget to fix it? And by doing that, that's going to eliminate that illusion of, I just go to work just so that they can go spend all the money. How is that fair? And so, but by doing it together, you'll see that these are conversations that are happening, and you're getting to decide together what's going to go on and move your family forward.
So that ties into the next question we got. Should a spouse have to ask permission to buy something if they earned the money themselves?
This is a good one.
This is a my money question, but yeah.
So I would say yes and no to this one. There's some yes, there's some no. And the part that's like the no is permission isn't the right word. And we kind of just talked about that. If you guys are deciding on budget together, then you're not having to ask permission. But if you're the one who's the working spouse, that doesn't give you free reign to just spend whatever you want, however you want, because you have to still support your household and your family. And so that's where having a discussion about it comes into play. And if you're doing that budget together, nobody should feel like they have to ask permission. You may bring some things to the table like, hey, we'd like to do this, as a family, I'd like of homeschool kids, I'd like to take the kids on this field trip. Can we pay for that? Oh, I was thinking about, going and doing this with the money. So we can't do both. Let's see what's more important to us at this time, which one needs to wait a little bit longer. And that's where it's not necessarily about permission. So yes, you kind of have to make sure you're clearing things and working together with your spouse to decide, but it's not a can I have some money so I can do this? I shouldn't have to ask you for money in our scenario, and the other way around, you shouldn't be able to just be like, well, I'm the one who makes the money, so I'm going to do whatever I want, figure it out for yourself. And so neither of those are both unhealthy polar opposites, so you've got to find that middle ground together.
I thought you were making fun of me because I asked for that today. You had some cash. You were counting it in front of me, and I'm like, "Can I have some?" And it's. And
tell the rest of the story.
And you gave it to me.
Okay, there we go.
But it was funny because there are some fun money or cash money. We talked about we have Julie's money and Thomas's money within our family budget.
Right.
So it's all our money, but in that we have some special things that don't have to, we're not asking for permission, but I don't have to bring to the table. I'm going to go get my nails done. I'm going to go, you name it. But what you were talking about, I think, from the family context is there are some needs. Now, define needs versus wants,
sure.
But we're all about that sit-down budget meeting. So instead of, I joked about that, can I have money today? But, if you're just kind of always asking, can I take the kids to here? Or we went ice cream. I didn't ask.
Mm-hmm.
We just went to ice cream, and it's that's the kind of stuff that are surprises, or it can come across as nagging. Can we? And it's that working spouse is you don't want to say no, but we don't have a plan for this.
Sure.
So I would just suggest those conversations start in that budget meeting to say, hey, just like the working spouse might be hey, I need some new outfit. I need a pair of shoes. I need whatever it is for work.
Mm-hmm.
The other parent might say, I really need to get out of the house. Is there a membership, an annual membership that we could invest in, or if they don't have kids, maybe it's something that, they do want to just go and do once a month or something so they don't lose their sanity. And that gets brought into the budget meeting, because then it can be does the math work where it's a yes? Or maybe it's a not yet, but now we know what we're saving for instead of you never saying that and you just go do it, or you're resenting the person that doesn't allow you, quote unquote, because you've never communicated about it.
Totally. I think you're nailing it there. And I think that, what you have to understand is that doing a budget together kind of gives you those decisions and the permission to spend freely within those boundaries that you've set together. And that is okay. Then you're good. Now, if you're stepping outside of the boundaries that you've set together on the budget and you need to spend something, then that's a discussion where it's, again, I don't like the word permission, but you have to bring it back to the table and say, hey, something's come up, it looks like we're going to be over budget on this, or we need to get this thing for school and we only had this much budgeted. Stepping out of the bounds requires a discussion to come back together where permission isn't the right word, but just that collaboration to say, okay, if that's what happened, then we need to figure that out. How are we going to short one other budget this month to make room? Or are we going to shorten the budget up next month? And figure those things out. So that's where I think it gets closest to asking permission, is if something's outside the budget and you need to get that, approved through that collaboration with your spouse.
Yeah. So we have one more question before we get to the practical takeaways, because I think our first takeaway is going to be like something nobody's ever thought of. But this question says, my wife makes more than me, and I feel like I'm supposed to be the one providing for the family. How do I deal with that?
Well, that's our exact situation right now, right? So I think that...
But I think this is also not necessarily a stay-at-home parent. So, like, let's say the wife is making more than the husband, and they're both working.
Even... Just
to relate to anyone that...
Even still was our situation just a few months ago before we decided to have me leave my job. And so I think that the first thing you can do is just be grateful that God put someone in your life that can bear that burden of provision with you. And so, because if it was all about you being the one to make more, then as the husband, if it was all about you being the one to make more and you're capped out at a certain level and your wife was forced to make less, then you're still not going to be providing. So be grateful for the fact that God put someone in your life that can bridge that gap of income needed to cover your household expenses. And I don't say that in a way to put you down as the one making less, but just be grateful. Like, flip the script instead of, having the pity party for yourself of, I'm supposed to be providing. Well, again, if it's our money, then you are. Because flip that around, without your amount that you're providing, your household would still be essentially, underwater financially. And so I think that's important as well.
Yeah, and I think it just goes back to knowing what they contribute isn't just that dollar on a paycheck. And so there's a difference if your spouse is out there doing their best, making the most that they can with their time and talents, versus just sitting at home and like, oh, well, you're the breadwinner, you can take care of that, So like in our scenario, you're doing so much for the house and the kids and the family, and you aren't, though, not that it's wrong to be called a stay-at-home parent, but you're contributing to the Marriage Puzzle brand and business. And so I just think that there's also people that might, like I said, make less, but what are they building?
Yeah.
Either for a business, a side gig, a relationship, their legacy, their mental health. Like, there's just so much more than that dollar, if we haven't stressed that enough, of what you're worth and your value. And that's my biggest takeaway of what I want people to hear.
Yeah, and worth and value tends to rear its head up in the form of pride. And in this exact scenario, that's essentially what you're dealing with, is your pride is the issue, not the dollar amount, not your value, not your worth. It's your pride is hurt because your wife makes more than you. And, you know, to be as blunt as possible, like, you have to get over it. That's what I had to do. I had to get over myself and realize that's not what it's about. It's not about me taking home more. It's about us working together and being one. And like I said a minute ago, if it weren't for me and the amount that I had been bringing home in the past, even though it was less than what you were doing, it was still necessary to our household. And now that's just taken on a different shape in our current season of life, but still just as important.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's, you got to lay down your pride. You got to just,
that's good.
for sake of better words, get over it.
For sharing that. But still send us in your questions. We won't always say get over it, but so we have two takeaways, two practical things you could do, because if we go back to those listening who has a stay-at-home parent, what's our biggest advice that they have never heard before?
So if you have a parent that stays at home, you do want to try to figure out some of the monetary things that they are offloading from your budget by staying at home. So you want to make sure that you are taking into account what childcare would cost, and the best way to look at this is, if that spouse died, what's it going to cost you to replace all of the things that they were doing? So that's going to be, suddenly you have to have full-time childcare. If you're still working, you have to have full-time childcare.
So even if they're in school, there's aftercare. Even if they're in free school, aftercare, camps for summer,
transportation, anything that's necessary there. Then you have to figure out the cooking. If they're the one who does primarily the cooking at home, the grocery shopping, you either have to be able to take that on, or you have to be able to be paying someone to do that, or the other thing could be like the cleaning of the house. That's cleaning. That stuff still has to get done. You still have laundry that has to get done. You have to have your house maintain cleanliness. And so if you have to have a house cleaner come in and take care of that for you, if your kids aren't old enough to really pick up a lot of that slack, which in a situation like that, God forbid that situation happens for anybody, but in a situation like that, everybody's going to have to step up a little bit more. Right. It's just going to naturally be how it falls. It's unfortunate because it shouldn't fall on the kids, but that's where you can be proactive as the adults to take these things into account. And what you can do is you can then go buy life insurance equivalent to that amount. So let's say it was going to cost you, as a random number, $50,000 per year to cover what your spouse that stays at home does. Then you really want to look into a life insurance policy that will cover 10 to 12 times that salary, because what that does is that covers you for 10 to 12 years, give or take, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on how well you manage the money, how much inflation goes up, all those different things. But if on top of that you invest that money that comes in and it regenerates with interest over time, it's going to stretch it out even longer. So going and figuring out those costs, and then making sure you have a life insurance policy set up on your spouse, so that in the event that something happens, you're not just stuck without anything to help cover you, and help cover the duties that they were taking care of, because suddenly you're going to realize how much value there was just even in those practical things, not even talking about the priceless value of now your spouse is gone, now your other half is gone, but the practical things that they take care of. Make sure you have that life insurance policy set up.
And the last takeaway is stop asking permission. That question came in, but just take that permission out of your vocabulary. You can flip that script on hey, when we have our budget meeting, I want to talk to you about
Yeah.
XYZ. And you and I, we keep a budget talk list. So we meet, the first Wednesday of every month for our budget meeting. And so, if you can't wait till a month, then of course just, schedule a one-off meeting. But I can just keep notes of things I want to ask, or I would say talk about, and then that's the appropriate context to discuss together when we're all looking at the numbers and make a group decision.
Yeah, our budget meeting is slated for once per month, our big budget meeting, but we do have a weekly check-in that we do that has a budget check-in aspect. It's not a full budget meeting, but it gives you those easy touch points because, you may have heard, if you've been listening for a while, you will hear us say things like, don't ambush your spouse with hey, I want to talk about everything that you spent this month. I
was about to put my feet up and sit down on the couch.
Right. Yeah. So having that weekly check-in with a budget aspect gives you that opportunity where they're already going to be ready for it. You still don't want to ambush them within the meeting, but it gives you that opportunity to calmly say oh, hey, just so you know, this thing came up. We had to spend more here. I've been watching it. We're going to have to figure something out. Okay, it gives you that touch point rather than waiting 3 more weeks until the next actual budget meeting when things are just all out of hand to work it out. You can make those course corrections. So take permission out of your vocabulary and put collaboration into it.
That's good. I'm glad you brought up our weekly meeting because we've been thinking about putting that as a template kind of out there for you guys. So if that's something you do want us to create and share, please let us know. Cheer us on if that's value to you to see our weekly check-in meeting structure.
Yeah, totally. Well, thanks for joining us on another episode of the Marriage Puzzle Podcast. Make sure you follow us in all the places listed down in the description. All the follow us on whatever podcast platform you're listening on, and all the social media channels. All the links are there so that you can click those and go find us. We put out podcast each week, but we're also putting out stuff throughout the week as well. So make sure you go check it out, and we look forward to seeing you back next week, where together we'll work on marriage one puzzle piece at a time.